Good afternoon, Wargamers. My name is Mekrat. You guys have been asking for it, so here it is, my official list building in Skaven guide. We had a lot of fun putting this one together, and I really hope that you guys find it informative. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm pretty active, and I try to answer all that I can. So, without further ado, let's plow ahead. So, most important thing with list building is that you want to determine what the goal of the list is. And oftentimes that goal starts with whether you're playing in a teams tournament or a singles tournament. Because let's be honest, peak Warhammer is at a GT, and most GTs are singles or teams. So that's the first thing to think about. If you're playing a singles list, you really need to consider what meta lists you need to be able to beat, and you need to be able to maximize your coverage and your win conditions, because in a GT, it's win at all costs. If you won by 1 point or 100 points, you still won. And at the end of the day, wins are the most important. 5-0 means you won 5 times. So you want to be able to win. And in order to win, you have to be able to play against anything. I would say that building a singles list is a lot of times harder than building a teams list, because you have to prepare for more when building a singles list. You have to be able to beat that weird skew list that you run into, or that top tier meta list that you run into, or whatever your best friend Bob is running while he's chugging beer and eating pretzels. So you need to be able to cover it all. If you're playing teams, you need to think about what your role is as a list. If you're an attacking list or a defending list. If you're an attacking list, you need to be able to win big and win consistently. If you're a defending list, you need to be able to not lose. Skaven as an army, I would say, skews towards defender pretty hard, because we're good at not losing, we're good at denying tactics, and we're good at scoring. We're not that good at winning big, because we can be a little inconsistent. So generally, I would say Skaven's a defender army. And when you're building a defender list, you need to think about what lists you're countering, what you need to have coverage for, and how to maximize your scoring. So that's the first and foremost bit. Next, you need to think about like the meat and bones of your list. Do you want a shooting list or a melee list, or a mix of both? Do you want to have an infantry focus or a monster focus? Skaven doesn't really have cavalry, so generally it's going to be either an infantry focused list or a monster focused list, or a bit of a mix of both. Do you want to have a lot of spells, or do you want to have a lot of prayers, or once again, a mix of both? And then do you want to run regular Skaven, or do you want to run Thanquol's Mutated Menagerie? Because let's be honest, if you're trying to win, you're not running Physics AOR because it's bad. You're either running Thanquol's Menagerie or regular Skaven. So do you want to run? Which one of those ones do you run? These are all things that you have to consider when you're first starting to build a list. You know, what's the goal of the list? What do you want to do with it? So yeah, moving on. Let's talk about Menagerie versus regular Skaven, because this is a question I get asked a lot. So I made this big pros and cons list of both armies. So let's go through them. Pros of Thanquol's Mutated Menagerie. Number 1, you're very durable. You're wound dense. You've got a 5-up ward. Once you've got your juice out, you've got access to -1 to hit. You've got a 4-up armor save. You're very, very durable. You can take a ton of punishment in that army. You can shrug off the most punishing anvils in the game and live to tell the tale. It's addictive, that amount of durability. Consistency. Your abilities just work in Mutated Menagerie. For the most part, all of your abilities just work. You take some damage, but the juice just happens. You always have the juice. You have decent, when you have the strike first rampage, it just happens. You always strike first. Most of your abilities happen on like 3-ups or 2-ups and stuff like that, for the ones that you do have to roll for. Your healing just happens. Like, you have a lot of consistency in this army. You don't have to plan about things failing very often. Basically, the biggest thing that you're worried about failing is the -1 attack from your rampage, or failing the -1 to hit aura on the Brood Terror. But basically everything else just happens. You have high rend. Basically every single one of your good troops has at least rend 2. Storm Fiends, all of their best attacks are rend 2. Brood Terror, his best attack is rend 2. The Hell Pit, his attack is rend 2, potentially rend 3. If you're going anti whatever +1 rend, the Storm Fiends can be rend 3. You have good rend, which is good. Into every army except Nighthaunt, it's good. You have a somewhat of immunity to chip damage with all of your healing. Both of your monsters have healing. If you're spamming Master Molders, which you should be spamming Master Molders, you should have at least 2 if you're running Thanquol's Mutated Menagerie. I prefer 3, but you should have at least 2 no matter what. You have a ton of healing, so chip damage is not super effective against you. You're also wound dense, which again, chip damage is not super effective against stuff that's wound dense. Storm Fiends, you know, with the juice are 8 wounds on a 5-up ward. Chip damage is not going to do much to them. You don't care if you're taking 2 damage, you're going to heal it no matter what. Brute Strength. Storm Fiends do a lot of damage. Let's not like, they can be a little swingy because they hit on 4s. But at the end of the day, with all out attack, they're 3s and 2s with Ren 2 with multi-damage weapons. They hit super hard. The Hellpit, he hits super hard. The Brood Terror, once he's got a couple +1 attacks, he hits pretty hard. Even Thanquol, he hits decently hard. Everything just hurts. So in terms of raw stats and brute strength, you've got it. You're very strong on low objective maps. This army's really good at standing on circles. If you're playing on like shifting objectives or border war or something like that, where you pick 2 or 3 objectives and you just stand there the whole game and you shrug off hits and you kill whatever touches you, you do that very, very, very well. And finally, this army is really easy to learn and really easy to play. You don't have a lot of tricks and flexibility, so you have less to remember. Basically, all you have to do is move, shoot, charge, fight, and heal. And that's about it. Let's talk about the cons of Mutated Menagerie. You have no spells or unbinds unless you have Thanquol, and even then, he's only a double caster. He's got his War Scroll spell and whatever endless spell lore you took, because the Mutated Menagerie spell is not super good. So not great spell casting there. Unbinds are nice, but generally, in my opinion, you don't play Menagerie with Thanquol. You can play him in Menagerie and it's okay, but I think generally the stronger list is to play without Thanquol. So not much in the terms of spell casting. You're slow. The Hellpit is 5 plus d6, which usually maths out to about 8. Brood Terror is 6, Thanquol's 8, Storm Fiends and Rat Ogres are 6, with the juice they become 8. So basically the fastest troop that you've got is 8, not counting the Hellpit spiking his move and moving like 11 or whatever. Generally speaking, the fastest your troop you have is 8-inch move. With Field Sergeant you can get to 10. But you have no teleporting, no teleporting, no run and charge, no movement bonuses other than the +2 inches. You're generally very slow. Everything hits on 4s. That means that your base troops can be very swingy, because 4-up is a coin flip chance to hit. If you have bad dice, chronically bad dice, you may struggle with this army a little bit, because everything hits on 4s. All-out attack helps a lot, and Prized Beast helps a lot. And if you're playing against an army with no debuffs, you should be just fine. But you are really going to struggle into an army that has -1 to hit, because you will not get much damage through. I talked about slow. You are lacking mobility. Like I said, you have no teleports. You're lacking tricks. Like I said, you don't have a Deceiver teleport. You don't have recursion. You don't have interesting pile-ins. You don't have 3 claw steps ahead. You're basically, the only trick that you have is you have the Strike First Rampage for your monsters, which can be a kind of gotcha or a kind of difficult to play around for your opponent. But that's really about it. And putting all that together, it's a pretty one-note playstyle. You just kind of trudge onto the objectives, smash stuff, and then stand there. You're also vulnerable to alpha strikes before your juice is up. Storm Fiends without the Molder Juice are not anything noteworthy in terms of durability. So if somebody shoves a unit of Paladors down your throat before you can get your juice up, you're probably going to lose 3 or 4 Storm Fiends. And that hurts really badly. You need to protect the Storm Fiends until you can get the juice up. So you can be vulnerable to alpha strikes. And because of how slow you are and how few units you have, you just absolutely suck on high objective maps. That's just how it is. Like, it is so hard for you to win on Scorched Earth, the 8 objective map, and it can be very difficult to win on the 6 objective maps too, because then you have to split up your army. and half of your army is a lot weaker than your whole army, obviously. And when they're far apart from each other, it can be difficult for them to go to support each other because they're not super fast. Generally, you don't want to split your army up. You want to kind of play as a big lump that crawls across the battlefield and kills stuff. So you can be very weak on high objective maps. So let's talk about regular Skaven now. The pros of regular Skaven. You're very difficult to plan around and play against because you have lots of tricks. So the first few points kind of go together. You have the Deceiver. He can scurry into combat. He can teleport to a different combat. You have 3 claw steps ahead. You can move units in your opponent's hero phase. You have good spells to unleash spell with, and you generally have good wizards. You have lots of options. You have lots of tricks in Skaven, lots of stuff to make it difficult for your opponent to do what they want to do to you. Skaven gets a lot of mileage out of denying battle tactics because of stuff like 3 claw steps ahead or the auto redeploy 4 on the Deceiver, you know, making a charge more difficult. Like, you have a lot of options with Skaven for dealing with your opponent's stuff. You have a lot of ranged damage. Skaven is probably the best shooting army in the game. I think we have the best shooting unit in the game in Rattling Guns. The Warp Lightning Cannon isn't bad either. You have lots of different ranges of damage. You've got long range damage, short range damage, mid range damage. You have lots of range damage, and range damage is generally good in Age of Sigmar as long as you're not spamming it, because if you're spamming it and you don't have any combat troops, you can struggle to get battle tactics. But range damage is generally good because it means you can reach out and affect the game without putting yourself in a negative position. You have good spells and good buffs. Physics Prayer is amazing. Your prayer lore is amazing. Your spell lore is amazing. Both Thankful and Screech have good War Scroll spells. The Warp Seer has a great War Scroll spell. You can easily field 3 to 4 casts if you want, which is quite a lot. You can field 3 to 4 prayers if you want, which is quite a lot. Your buffs are generally good, like even your units like Kritok that give buffs, or the Screaming Bell, which gives a debuff. Like, you have lots of potential buffs and debuffs and spells, so that gives you more flexibility. You have teleporting and summoning, so your positioning is really good. That in combination with 3 claw steps ahead, you can get units where you want them to be. You can bring units where you need them to be. Teleporting is super strong in Age of Sigmar just because it's a movement based game, and instantly putting a guy from here to all the way over there is going to be very strong. You can be very fast. Vermin Lords are move 10. Doomflayers are on average 10. 7 plus 3 is 10. And the average on a 2d6 is a 7. So they generally move at about 10. Vermin Lords move 10. You do have access to run and charge. And Field Sergeant goes a long way in this army. Your Eshin troops with Field Sergeant all move 9 inches, which is pretty fast. Regular troops move 8, which is okay. So yeah, you can be quite fast. You're very strong on high objective maps. You are probably one of the best defender armies in the game at just scoring well on a high objective map. In my experience, I've usually can score at least 35 points on a 6 objective map, even if I'm getting slaughtered. Like, I've almost brought games back from being in a terrible position with just my summoning and the Deceiver and a wizard. So you have a lot of outs and you're very strong on high objective maps. So let's talk about the cons of Skaven. You're fragile. You don't have good armor saves. I don't think you have a single War Scroll that has a 3-up save. Your most durable troops have 4-up saves, and the vast majority of your troops have 5-up saves or worse. You have no real anvils. The closest thing you have to an anvil is a unit of 6 Storm Fiends with -1 to hit and wound, and a 6-up ward, potentially a 5-up ward. Now that is durable, but it is like sunk cost. Like, you're putting so much into that to make that one anvil, whereas other armies get units that can stand there with a 3-up save and a 5-up ward just by existing. So no real anvils. You're weak to what I call the destruction double, which is any sort of melee powerhouse army that's fast, that makes you go first and then doubles you and wipes you off the table. Unless you layer your screens really well, or you get some magical interventions off of some kind, or you get something to go off, you can be very weak to the destruction double because you don't have any durable troops, and once your screens die, all your squishy stuff, all your glass cannons are very vulnerable. You can struggle into shooting. This one's really dependent on what list you're running. If you're running a bunch of weapons teams and you have clan rats, you should be fine. If you're running a bunch of vermin lords and pestilence units, or you're running doomflayers, that they can all struggle into shooting, just because you're very fragile, and most shooting units do a pretty good amount of damage to low armor saves. You have some amount of randomness. The Deceiver's ability is a 4-up. Doomflayers have 2d6 move. Hellpit is 5 plus d6 move. Scurry Away is a 3-up. You rely on spells a lot. All of this is randomness. So a lot of your buffs happen on 3-ups. Some of them happen on 2-ups, but I would say the majority of them are probably 3-ups. So it's like, and the Screaming Yell it's like a 2 to a 4 on the dice, which is essentially a 4-up. So there's a decent amount of randomness in this army that you're just gonna have to swallow and get used to and deal with it. That's more of an annoyance than a con, because you can still play around it, but it is something to keep in mind. You can be inconsistent on low objective maps. It really depends on the list. If you're running a full melee list and you've got like Storm Fiends and Rat Ogres and you're running Molder and stuff like that, you can do better on them. But generally the lists that I run can struggle on low objective maps just because you don't have a ton of staying power. And you want to kind of avoid combat and jump around and score a lot, and that can be difficult if there's only 3 or 4 objectives. And then the last hurdle or con I would say with Skaven is they are a hard army to play. They're one of the like high skill floor, high skill ceiling armies in the game for sure. They take a lot of practice. You're gonna lose a lot. That's just how it is. Like, they are a very difficult army. There's a lot to remember. There's a lot of tricks. You have to constantly be thinking ahead, planning ahead, trying to deny opponents, trying to bait opponents. Like, all of this stuff comes into play when you're playing regular Skaven. So now that we've got the Menagerie versus regular Skaven debate kind of down, which, you can look through the pros and cons and decide which one is more your style. And most of the stuff that I'm going to talk about will apply to both of these. I'll make some special points for the Menagerie because there's less to talk about. So moving on. Up next, I've kind of broken down most of our commonly used units into different unit roles, and I've written down a general process for list building. I'll go down the general process for list building first, and then I'll go through the unit roles. So, as I've already covered a little bit, you want to decide what the purpose of the list is going to be first. So, an example of this would be you want to play just an average run-of-the-mill singles list. You want to try to go 4-1 or better. Reasonable goal. Maybe 3-2 or better. Reasonable goal. 4-1 is a little sweaty. 5-0 is very sweaty. 3-2, reasonable goal for an average tournament goer, I think. Then you want to identify your core units and your synergies that you want to use to make this list work. So an example of this, Deceiver, Screech, Deathmaster. All 3 of those have the Eshin keyword. Deathmaster gives them both run and charge. Screech can give all 3 of them +1 rend. And the Deceiver and Screech play off each other very well because the Deceiver's very mobile, jumps around, has a little bit of shooting, and is a scalpel. Screech is a heavy hitter, big hammer. And then Clan Rats for screens. So that would be core units and synergies. Then you want to balance your damage types. Like I said, you don't want to just spam shooting units because then you're going to struggle on tactics. You need at least some kind of melee units so you can score stuff like Ordained Charge and Do Not Waver. So Doomflayers are perfect for this. They're fast, they deal good damage, they're consistent. Great, love it. And then Rattling Guns. You want to have some shooting with Skaven because we get a lot of mileage out of shooting. It's always great when you can kill something without having to go in combat with it and putting yourself out of position. And we have good buffs for our shooting units, and most of our shooting units are also infantry, so we can bring them back. So Rattling Guns, great. Then you want to identify some specialist units or some tactics units. Now, this one can sometimes be unnecessary because you'll start to have a little bit of overlap because Doomflayers can be a great tactics unit. Screech and Deceiver can both be great tactics units. Clan Rats can be good tactics units. With the Chaos, you've got Offering Carnage, which is kill 2 units. You can do that with shooting, so Rattling Guns can help be tactics units. But I think the Night Runners are a great specialist tactic units because they're fast. They can easily score you stuff like Seize the Center and take their land. Yeah, so There's a general process for list building, kind of what I go through in my head. So let's talk about unit roles really quickly, because you generally want to have a solid mix of these when you're building any list. So for fast hammers, we've got the Doomflayers, Screech, and Warbringer. These guys do good damage on the charge, especially if they're in Screech and Warbringer, especially if they're in their respective subfaction. Doomflayers are just consistent all around. They can be a little, they have random movement, so sometimes they can go slow, but generally they're going to move at least 8 or 9 inches. So, fast hammers. Then we got counter chargers. These are units that do a lot of damage, but they're very slow. So you're not going to be able to just run up the board and charge them. What you're going to want to have happen is your opponent to charge you and then bounce off your screens, and then on your turn you move the screens and then charge these units. Or you double turn, move these units, you win priority, move these guys up, double turn, move them up again, and then charge. So we've got Rat Ogres, Storm Fiends, Storm Vermin. You'll notice they all move 6. The only somewhat of exception of these guys is Storm Fiends, because they can deep strike in the opponent's turn. So you can kind of use them as a weird positionally fast hammer, because you can preemptively put them in a position where their 6-inch move will be able to get them into combat. But sometimes this leaves them outside of their buff auras, so it's a give and take. Generally, all 3 of these guys, you buff them up and then countercharge them after your opponent's collapsed on you. Then we've got long range DPS. Jezzails and Warp Lightning Cannons. Jezzails are 18, can be 24. Warp Lightning Cannon is 20. Warp Lightning Cannon does pure mortal wounds at a long range with all-out attack and overcharge. He does about 9 on average, which is pretty good. Going to be great into high armor. Jezzails, they're 13 attacks, 4s and 3s, Ren 2/2 with crit auto. You can easily get them to 3s and 2s with all-out attack or Screech buff and the Scryer +1 to wound buff. They do decently consistent damage. They're probably a little expensive for how much damage they do, but they're not bad. They are not a weapons team, so they're just an infantry, which means they can slot into most lists pretty easily. Then we've got mid-range DPS, Ratlings and Scourges. Ratlings are like 9 times out of 10 going to be better than Scourges because they're way cheaper and they do way more damage. Rattling guns generally will be the first shooting unit you include because they're the perfect balance of all of them. They have enough range where you can use them, they can keep them safe while still reaching out and affecting the game, and they do high enough damage that you're not sacrificing damage for range. So yeah, then you got short range DPS, you got Acolytes and Warp Fire Throwers. Both of these guys are only 10-inch range, which means that you can be a little iffy whether, you can still keep them safe while getting them in range to shoot. And one downside is because they're 10-inch range, generally you can't deep strike them and shoot them because your opponent will be able to redeploy back. So Rattling guns are great at deep striking and shooting because the only way your opponent gets safe is if they roll a 6 to redeploy. But Acolytes and Warp Fire Throwers still both do a lot of damage and are very cheap. Acolytes especially will shred hordes, and Warp Fire Throwers will also shred most anything they shoot at because they're a bucket of dice at Rend 2. So you're kind of sacrificing range for super high output here. You can make them work. You just have to have a little bit more finesse. Then you got Scalpels. These are guys that don't do a ton of damage by themselves, but they're good at taking out key pieces or getting where they need to be to take out a key target. So you got like the Deceiver, the Deathmaster, or Night Runners. And Scalpels are really important in Skaven because one of our strengths as an army is being able to take out key units that are going to be a problem for us. You want to identify what units in your opponent's army are a problem and then get rid of them quickly. And these 3 guys are all good at doing that because they're fast and they have a shooting attack on top of their melee attack. The Deceiver is the best at this, but he's also the most expensive. The Deathmaster does pretty inconsistent damage, but he'll generally win a fight against another foot hero. For an example, I played against Beast of Chaos. I auto-ran him. He had Field Sergeant on him, and then I auto-ran him, so he moved 15 inches to get way around a Bestigor unit, and then he shot at and then charged and killed the Great Bray Shaman that was holding the Summoning Trumpet. So that is definitely a key target that we want gone because we don't want them to summon anything, and we want to get rid of the run and charge as soon as we can. So I'm happy to throw the Deathmaster in a position where he may die just to take out that super key target. So Scalpel's very important. Then we got buff pieces. You got stuff like Kritok for Storm Vermin, Visic for any infantry, Plague Pack to throw prayers on infantry, and the Warp Seer to buff our movement and protect us. These guys are a little bit less like necessary, and generally if you're playing them, it means you're building the list around them. And they do give really strong buffs, but keep in mind that if you're going to have a build around me unit like this and then they die, the list starts to fall apart. Like if Kritok dies, Storm Furman's damage falls off very hard. If Vizic dies, then you lose your super strong double fight prayer, which you were probably building around. So there's give and take with the buff pieces like this, but generally they can be played if you want to. Then we got debuffers. These are guys that rather than buffing your own troops, hinder the enemy troops in some way, which can be better because it means that they're less necessary, because you're not debuffers. Generally, you're not building your entire strategy around them, or you're generally stacking multiple of them up. So we've got stuff like the Plague Furnace for -1 ward. We've got the Screaming Bell for -1 to hit. We've got the Bell of Doom for -1 to wound. We've got Bizik for -1 attack, and then his Rampage also does -1 to hit and wound. So, you know, debuffers can be strong. Generally, they work well with some of our quote-unquote more durable troops like Clan Rats and Storm Fiends. So, yeah, debuffers. Then we got speed and tactics units. Night Runners, Vermin Lords, Doomflayers, Deathmaster. A lot of these you've seen already because they fall into another category. But it's good to have multiple of these units in your army just to help you deal with, just to help you score tactics, because like I've said, scoring is very important. That's how you win the game. Then you need screens. Skaven is one of the few armies, in my opinion, that still absolutely needs screens, because none of our hammers can take a hit. They're all glass cannons. You have to have screens to protect glass cannons. So we've got Clan Rats, Plague Monks, and Night Runners. Clan Rats are the best because they require the most effort to kill. Plague Monks are less good than Clan Rats, but still decent. Night Runners give you protection against alpha strikes because they have a pregame move. So whichever you need, you can have those options there. And then for wizards, you've got your Grey Seer. He reliably gets out one spell. Arch Warlock, he does a useful thing in free cover fire as well as having a spell. And then you got Thankful for 2 spells at +1. And then the Vermin Lords are all at least single casters. 2 of them are double casters. And those 2 also have War Scroll spells that are good. Generally, Skaven spells are all quite strong, except for the Grey Seer on Screaming Bell. His War Scroll spell is quite bad. So our wizards are very much worth playing, and basically all of our wizards, except for the Arch Warlock, can take any Skaven with them, which is very strong. So in my opinion, if you're building a 2-drop list, you probably want at least a Vermin Lord and then a Grey Seer. I think that's a great place to start. Probably a Vermin Lord Deceiver or Screech, and then a Grey Seer on foot. You could do Thankful and then a Grey Seer, or the Warp Seer and then Arch Warlock or something like that. But generally, I think if you're going a 2-drop, you probably want 2 wizard heroes. So now that we've covered all of that, let's move on. One thing that's very important when you're list building is to consider the statistics. Do the math, okay? Some of you may hate doing math. I get it. I like doing math, but I understand if you don't like it. Find the most efficient units for their points cost and run them. If you want to win, you have to do this. Part of list building is crunching the numbers. You have to know what units do the most damage for the least amount of points, right? You have to know that Rattling Guns are better than Warpful Scourges, because if you're running a bunch of Warpful Scourges, your list is going to be less efficient because they're more expensive and do less damage. Shy away from unreliability where you can. Assume you're going to roll lower than average. I find that this is a helpful tip in general. You want to assume that you're going to do a little bit less damage than the math says you should. Like I say here, it's better to overkill than to underkill. However, that being said, cheap random units can be quite a pain for your opponent to deal with since they are hard to plan around. A good example of this is the Warp Lightning Cannon. He only costs 130 points, and he has a random attack, but he could randomly do 13 mortal wounds with his shooting attack. You're expecting him to do 7, 8, maybe 9. And if he does less than that, it's okay. He's still getting some value because he's still probably going to do at least 4 or 5 for 6 mortal wounds. So it's decent chip damage. And if he spikes, you really only need him to spike once, because taking 13 or 14 mortal wounds on whatever your opponent's most important unit is going to cripple that unit immediately. And 130 points, you're happy with that trade. Another example of this is the Vermin Lord Deceiver. You might find it frustrating that his rampage only happens on 4 up. That being said, because it only happens on a 4-up, your opponent can never know if it's going to happen or not. So it's extremely difficult to plan around. What you do with the Deceiver is you put yourself into positions constantly where you don't need the 4-up to happen. He's going to get value anyway. But if the 4-up does happen, you can really cripple your opponent off of it. And situations like that are so tough to plan around for your opponent. So that's why having randomness can be a detriment to your opponent and a boon for you. You just have to use it correctly. This last point here, I know it sounds obvious, but don't take bad units. If you want to win, and if you're watching this video, you probably want to win, you want the easiest path to victory. You want to have to do less work than your opponent. So don't play bad units. If you play good units, you'll have a better chance of winning because your units will work. Don't like hamper yourself by playing a bunch of bad units and forcing yourself to have a more difficult path to victory. Don't, handicap yourself. That's the word I was looking for. So let's talk about some sample lists now, because that's what you're all here for. You want to see the lists. So here's my 5.0 list from Hogpit GT a few weeks back. Lots of you were asking for this, so here we go. It's Warpcog Convocation. We've got Screech, he's the general. He's got 20 clan rats, 4 doom players, 6 rattling guns. Then we got the Verminlord Deceiver. He's got 20 more clan rats. He's got Foul Hide and Scurry Away. He's got a Deathmaster and 10 Night Runners. So what are the goals of this list? They are to split enemy forces and focus down problem units, avoid combat and fight on your terms, force difficult combats and interactions for your opponents, score well, tie up enemy units with manifestations and night runners, deny taxes with Screech and Deceiver with Rampage and Counterspell respectively. So let's put this into practice really quickly. A good example of what to do here. I make an aggressive play on my turn, and the Deceiver is a little out of position and Screech is a little out of position, but I just killed some of their stuff. Now, I've put myself in a position where if I win priority up next, my 2 Verminlords are forward and my Doomflayers are back ready to go. I can shove everything in and kill a bunch of their stuff and cripple them forever. And if they win priority, I could 3 Claw Steps a unit forward to protect. I can unleash, or I can use cover spell. No, not cover spell. Magical intervention. Thank you. Magical intervention to teleport Screech back out of combat to get back home. Deceiver is already difficult to go after for your opponent because he has 2 chances to just jump out of combat with his Rampage and Scurry Away. So that's the force difficult combats and interactions for your opponent. Another thing to keep in mind is that you have Unleash spell or Magical Intervention for Strike Last, which can be very difficult for your opponent. Basically, one of the big things with this list is making the game very tough to play for your opponent and then giving yourself an edge. If you make your opponent have a lot of problems dealing with your list, they may start to get flustered, they may start to make mistakes. Skaven's really good at capitalizing on mistakes. So yeah, all of that, keep all of that in mind. So let's go over a few tips and tricks, things to remember for this list. You want to save the Screech Eshin buff for your go turn. And what I mean by your go turn is one thing you can do is, and I did this against OBR in game 5, I had Screech and Deceiver ready to go here, and then I had the Doomflayers ready to go here. I had anti-cavalry +1 rend on my Doomflayers because of my, my buff, and then I hadn't used Eshin buff left. Catacross was right in front of me with his Immortus Guard behind him, and then a unit of 10 ponies was on the left flank. I had priority. I hit the Screech buff. I cast Strike Last on Catacross. I run and charge to get with the Deathmaster to get Screech and the Deceiver in position to charge Catacross, and I move the Doomflayers up to get in position to charge the ponies. I charge both the Verminlords in, I charge the Doomflayers in, I fight first with the Doomflayers, knowing that Catacross is fight last. I kill like 7 of the ponies with the Doomflayers because they're super strong at combat, and then double fighting with both of the Vermin, fighting with Screech and then the Deceiver after because of the Strike Last. Deceiver's rend 4 because of the Eshin buff. The Screech is rend 3. They killed him. They just full to dead killed him. And I won the game from then on because I had crippled his 2 biggest pieces. So that's what I mean by a go turn, and that's a great opportunity to save your Eshin buff for. Up next, utilize Strike Last to allow you to send multiple units in combat. I just talked about this again. One thing to note with Skaven, and I've mentioned this already, none of our hammers can take a hit. I mean, the Vermin Lords can like maybe shrug off a mild, like a low to medium combat threat because they don't bracket, but generally our hammers cannot take a hit. So Strike Last is imperative because it means that you get to fight with both of your hammers. If it's your turn, you get to fight with the thing normally, and then because their other thing is Strike Last, you get to fight again. So you really have to pick your combats with Skaven. Another thing to keep in mind is Screech's +1 to hit aura lasts until the next hero phase, so when you cover fire with a unit of rattling guns or a warp lightning cannon or whatever you're cover firing with, it will be getting +1 to hit from Screech, so it'll be hitting normally. That's huge. We love that. Rattling guns already do a good amount of damage on cover fire because they have crit 2 hits. Putting them back to hitting on 4s and wounding on 4s means they do a ton of damage with the cover fire, and maximizing your damage is very important with Skaven. Chronomantic Cogs, if you rewind time, it gives wizards -1 to be hit. Vermin Lords are wizards, which means it gives the Vermin Lords -1 to be hit. This is super strong because it means that they can live against most hammers in the game now. They'll still probably die to 10 Chosen, but like they probably live a Gargant. They probably live something like a charging Belthanos. They might live charging Alariel. It's a little iffy there. They probably still die to something like Kragnos, but if you're playing against any army that hits on 4s, any of their hammers probably now bounce off of your Vermin Lords with -1 to hit. Super strong there. Another tip for and trick, something to note with the Doomflayers, I am generally okay with losing this unit as long as it trades up. I've gone in with the Doomflayers and had them kill something that was big for the opponent, and then they got countercharged and died. I'm fine with that as long as I took out something that's going to be problematic for my other units to deal with. I can generally win a game with just Screech, Deceiver, and the 6 Rattling Guns, as long as I've taken out whatever their biggest threat is. Then the Doomflayers are generally very good at that. Another thing to note with the Doomflayers is because they're fast and they are 4 wounds, they can power through a lot of stuff. So you can charge a thing and then edge tag a screen. They can kill the thing, stay in combat with the screen, power through off the screen, and then 3 claw steps back into safety. So now you've just reached out super far, killed something, and then come all the way back to safety, and there's nothing your opponent can do about it. Last thing to note with this list, that's another little tip and trick. The Night Runners, if you issue redeploy to them with the Deceiver, if they roll less than a 4, they automatically get a 4. This is great because you can get basically guaranteed protection if you play around the terrain really well and you position your Night Runners properly. You can like have your Deceiver in the back with the Night Runners to the left and a rock to the right. Somebody pushes something up, you redeploy the Night Runners to the right to be next to the rock, so now your opponent is stuck there, and if they charge the Night Runners, they'll just kill the Night Runners and then you get to countercharge them on your turn. So yeah, generally another tip and trick. Another tip that I actually just thought of that I want to mention that I don't have on the slide here is always save 2 command. If you're playing a Deceiver list, this trick applies to you. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about this quite as much. Always save 2 command points for the Deceiver for a counter charge, because the biggest counterplay to the Vermin Lord Deceiver is to charge something next to him, and don't bring him in combat until you're in the combat phase proper, because his abilities to run away out of combat only trigger at the start of combat phase before the fighting. So be careful when positioning your Deceiver next to screens so your opponent can't do that, but also keep 2 command points so you can countercharge the Deceiver into combat to then give you chances to get out of combat. Basically, you're always going to take that trade, right? Basically, you're in this, if you're stuck in this situation where something has charged next to this Deceiver and is going to pile in to hit it, what you can do is you can either save the command points for all out defense if you think he'll live, if you know for sure he's going to die, like it's 10 Chosen or something like that, or 6 Vanguard. Wouldn't you rather give yourself the 4-up chance to get away and then the 3-up chance to get away, rather than just hope that he doesn't die to 6 Vanguard? Like, the odds of him dying to 6 Vanguard are astronomically like higher than the odds of him living. So it's much better to countercharge back into combat, which might seem scary, but remember that you've got all of your tricks to get out, and then hopefully you hit one of those tricks to get out of combat with the Vanguard or whatever scary thing just charged, and then you're safe. And that is absolutely worth 2 command points. So keep that in mind with the Deceiver. Up next is a list from my buddy Warpfire Jordan at Warpfire Minis. Shout out Jordan, love you. This is something he sent me the other day that he was thinking about trying. We've got a Deceiver, 20 Clan Rats, 4 Doom Flayers, 6 Rattling Guns. I'm sure you're seeing some parallels here. These are just generally our good units. He's trying out the Hell Pit. He's got a regular Grey Seer, more Clan Rats, and then 3 Scourgers. So his list is a little bit heavier on bodies than mine. He's got more protection because he's got 60 Clan Rats. And then he's got more shooting than me because he's got the 3 Scourgers. Actually, it ends up being about the same shooting as me because I've got the he's got the Deceiver, but I've got the Night Runners and the Deathmaster, which give me some chip shooting as well. Scourgers probably do a little bit more damage to them, but it's probably about the same shooting overall. And then the Grey Seer is just a really reliable wizard. So he's basically trading a little bit of my double Vermin Lord like speed and super punchiness for more consistency and more protection with the extra Clan Rats. So the goals of this list are similar to the goals of my list, but we've also, you know, got like focus down enemy threats with shooting, outplay your opponents to some degree, deny and score tactics with Deceiver, and then kill enemy threats with the Hell Pit and Flayers. So pretty straightforward here. Some tips and tricks to remember with this list: the Flayers and the Hell Pit have anti-infantry on them, so save them for countercharging. The Hell Pit Abomination is super fragile and slow, so think about carefully how you're going to use him. One thing that you can kind of do with him is put him off by his own, because he can be awkward to deal with because he's durable enough that a screen won't kill him, but cheap and fragile enough that your opponent doesn't want to commit a super hammer to killing him, and he'll kill anything that's not a super durable unit because he's quite punchy. So he's generally a pretty good lone operative. Another thing is the 3 Scourgers can do a pretty surprising amount of damage with 66 shots. I think you're generally getting about 21, 22, and you hit on 2s with crit 2 hits, which means you're going to probably hit with 21, 22. And then if you wound on 3s, it means you're probably going to wound with about 14. So that's 14 at Rend 1, potentially Rend 2 into Cavalry, which is a good amount of damage. And they're a great distraction Carnifex because people are always scared of shooting units, so you can kind of throw them away callously and let them die, and then summon 2 back, because when you have 3 models, when you summon them back, you round up, so you get 2 back. So they can be a great distraction Carnifex, and they do a pretty good amount of damage, so I think they're I think they're a little overcosted, and you can probably get by with running 3 Rattling Guns. 3 Scourgers could do some work too. So sample list 2 there. And then sample list 3 is a Menagerie list that I ran in the Release the Beast tournament recently. We've got a Master Molder, who's the general with the Hell Pit, and he also carries the Triton artifact. We've got another Master Molder with 6 Fiends, full Rend 2 melee on the Fiends, 3 Rat Ogres. We've got another Master Molder with 6 more Fiends, full Rend 2 melee on them as well, and then a Brood Terror. The goals of this is very simple. You stand on circles, you counter your meta armies, you force difficult matchups on low objective missions, and you have the potential to end games off of a double turn. That's really all you need for this team's list. The potential to end games off a double turn is always going to be very strong because you have so much damage that you can just cleave through everything really quickly. There's very few armies in the game that are comfortable playing into this list because of how durable it is and how difficult it is to beat on a low objective mission. And you are a pretty solid counter to stuff like slaves. The reason, I'm going to spoil the secret, the reason, in my opinion, that the Menagerie is so good into slaves is you can frontline the Hell Pit and give them something to charge. And if they charge it, you hit the fight first rampage, you kill a bunch of Chosen with your fight first, because Rend 3 damage 2 into Chosen is quite good. I think you kill 5 on average, which cripples the unit. And then when he dies, he blows up, and on a 3-up, he makes them -1 attacks for the rest of the game. So if the Chosen charge the Hell Pit and he hits the strike first, he basically cripples the unit for the rest of the game. Which, when you're playing against slaves, they generally only have 2 hammers. Crippling one of the hammers right off the boot is amazing. And it's very hard for slaves to play into this because you just frontline the help hit and then they don't have anything to charge, because if they know that they're going to have that happen to them with the help hit, they just won't charge you. And if slaves is not charging you, you're winning. So tips and tricks to remember with this. -1 to hit hurts you a lot, but do remember you have a once per game for a double all-out attack. I believe it has to be monsters, but still good. Keep Master Molders alive. This is like #1 priority with Thanquol's Mutated Menagerie, because the self-damage adds up really quickly. You lose like 1, potentially 2 fiends a battle round to self-damage, which is a lot, unless you have all of this healing. So definitely good. Use the +1 attack on the Brood Terror. He always will heal the self-damage because it's only D3 and he heals D6. So he's going to be generally healing more than he's taking. On average, he heals like 3.5 to 4. And on average, he takes 2. Plus, he's got 2 combat profiles. So +1 attack does more on him than anybody else, because you can only put it on monsters. Use the strike last, or use the strike first rampage defensively as a deterrent. Make them get punished for charging you. This is the best way to use the strike first, in my opinion. If you get charged by a big hammer and you're going to die anyway, it's worth it to get your damage out before you do die. Suiciding the help hit in to hit their whole army with -1 attacks is usually worth it if you can do that. If your opponent bubbles up to try to keep themselves safe from you, it can definitely be, especially if they're a full melee army with most of their troops having like 2 or 3 attacks. Like if you're playing against trogs or something like that, if you can hit all of their units of trogs with -1 attack, they'll cease to do any damage to you. So it's usually worth it. General game plan is castle up and protect the fiends until you get the juice on them. They die easy without the juice, but once they get the juice, they're nigh unkillable. And then, yeah, as I've already stated, losing models hurts. Do what you can to keep the fiends unit healthy until they have the juice on them. So yeah, that's the 3 sample lists that I have. Up next, I've got a couple of potential list concepts. These are kind of just not super thought out yet, but they're just ideas that are floating around in my head that I'm gonna try out at some point. Full Molder with Rogers and Physic is something I want to try, because I think Rat Ogres are cheap enough now and do enough damage with the double fight ability that they could be interesting. Pestilence Wagon plus the Warp Lightning Cannon could be interesting because, you know, a lot of the most durable troops in the game have a 3-up armor save with a 5-up ward. Pestilence Wagon making that a 6-up ward, and then the Warp Lightning Cannon doing mortal wounds to ignore armor means you can cut through that stuff pretty quickly. A full Alpha Shoot with Screech means you could dump a whole bunch of shooting units and then give them all +1 to hit from Screech's ability. There's something there potentially. Mixed Arms with Eshin and Scryer is generally what I've been running with the Deceiver Screech with some rattling guns. Full melee with Critdock and a bunch of Storm Vermin. I think there's some bad matchups that you have to worry about here just because Storm Vermin are super fragile, but they do quite a bit of damage, so there is something there, I think. Again, a Mixed Arms with Verminous and Scryer. Maybe you run like a good amount of Clan Rats, some Storm Vermin, and then some guns, and you just have a bunch of damage and a bunch of troops with some small heroes. And then you could do like a debuffs and tricks list with full Clan Rats, like what Tom Guan ran, where he has the 180 Clan Rats. I think there's a world where you run Physic with a whole bunch of Clan Rats, and then you throw like +1 attack on them and +1 to wound crit mortal. Double fight and have them kill a bunch of stuff, and then have them be durable because you make them -1 attacks. So I think there's something there too. So anyway, go crazy with these list ideas. You can feel free. These are just some musings I had, basically. And then I want to end on a few things to keep in mind with playing Skaven. Skaven takes a lot of practice. Please don't be discouraged if you lose more than you win. I lost so much with this army when I first started playing because it is so difficult. There's a lot to remember, and it can take a long time to learn it all. So don't get discouraged. Keep at it. Keep playing. You'll get there. This might be controversial and might be difficult to hear for some people, but it has to be said. You very rarely actually lose because of bad dice. Generally, it's because you made a mistake. You know, Warhammer is a game where there are dice, but generally the better player wins every time, which means that it can't be just a pure dice game. It is a game of skill primarily. Learn from your mistakes and improve every game. A good tip for learning not to lose to bad dice is always assume that everything your opponent rolls will be successful, and then play around that. Like if you're playing into Slaves to Darkness, just always assume that they are going to get the strike first rampage off. If you're playing against, you know, a deep strike charge army, just assume they're going to get the charge out of deep strike. If you're playing against Croak, assume he's going to get the spell and do 3 damage every time, right? If you're planning around the worst happening, then the better will generally happen, and you can generally get a win from that. Another thing to keep in note, Skaven is a very deep army. We have a lot of war scrolls, we have a lot of tricks, a lot of tech. Build to your strengths. Find a list that suits your playstyle. I've always enjoyed Double Vermin Lord. I've always felt like fast beat sticks with tricks is right up my alley. I like shooting as well. Some people don't like shooting. I do. I think it's strong. I think it's good. If you complain about shooting, that's fine. You're allowed to. I'm still going to play it into you. So find a list that suits your playstyle and then play it. You know, if people are constantly hating on you for playing something NPE, if you want to stay friends with them, maybe tone it down a little bit. But I personally think that you shouldn't be yelled at for playing something NPE when you're at a GT. You're there to win, right? It's a competitive environment. Play what's good. Always play to the mission. This is the most important thing. Scoring is so important, and it's very often more important than killing. And although Skaven is good at killing, we're at the end of the day really good at scoring, and scoring is how you win the game, right? So a good example of this is you might be tempted to just charge all of your stuff in and get a whole bunch and do a whole bunch of fights. But if you can score 10 points and only charge 1 unit in and only kill 1 of their units, and you won't lose anything in return, and then you can protect that unit in your turn somehow, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be better than just shoving your army into them and then fighting and then seeing who's left standing at the end of the game. If you're chugging beer and eating pretzels and cheese, and you're just there to have a good time, and you don't really care about winning or losing, sure, shove your army into them, see what happens, you'll have fun. But if you're trying to win and trying to be competitive, scoring is the most important, right? So, and Skaven's really good at playing evasive and playing the scoring game. So do that. So yeah, maybe a little controversial at the end here, maybe some hard things to hear. You know, I had to learn pretty early on not to get mad at bad dice. It happens. You're going to have bad dice. You're going to have hero phases where your wizards constantly miscast. You're going to have games where your deceiver fails his 4-up and then fails his 3-up and dies to 10 chosen and you lose the game. It's going to happen. You just need to learn to not let that get you down, and that it happens. It's a dice game, and move on. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun making this video. A little bit more of a serious tone for today, but I didn't want to make this video funny, or, you know, I didn't try to put a lot of effort into making this video super entertaining, because if you're watching this video, you're here for the information, and that's what I wanted to give you, the information. So if you're looking for something super entertaining, keep watching the channel. I've got some entertaining videos coming out soon. I'm really excited for my AWO style every army in AOS. It's taking me a long time to edit, but I'm very proud of it so far, and you will see it probably in the next week or so. In the meantime, I'll keep putting out tier lists and short videos and some long form content like this. This video is probably almost an hour, but you're here to hear my mad Skaven ramblings, and I hope you enjoyed it. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.